Happy Friday, Baylor College of Medicine and friends of Baylor. The audience needs to pipe down a little bit. We have a lot of a disruption here. So, of course, I have come back. I went on vacation to Singapore. Well, not vacation, but I was on business partly and vacation to Vietnam after that. And because there's a big surge in COVID, 23% increase in Singapore, I did get a booster shot, just because a lot of people asked me what I was going to do. So I had a booster shot, and I will tell you what's going on with COVID because it's really interesting and changing. But first, while I was gone, some things happened. So, as you probably know, there's this thing called the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices that advises the CDC on what vaccines to recommend. They're experts. In fact, one of them is a Baylor faculty member who look at all the data and then decide on who should get shots and when, and the insurance companies and government programs are required to cover those vaccines because these people are experts in the field. So imagine I was surprised when I got back and all 17 are fired. But luckily we have 8 new ones who apparently have some knowledge of vaccines. I don't know. Anyway, that was my surprise when I returned. But in the news, in addition to that, there's a yellow fever threat. So yellow fever is really emerging in South America. There's almost a tripling of cases, 221 confirmed human cases. This is a flavivirus that causes pretty severe illnesses in people. And it can be a mild illness, but when it's severe, it causes jaundice. That's why it's called yellow fever. And it's been a pretty high mortality. The case fatality rate's been about 40%. So it's a little bit concerning. The other concerning thing is it used to be just in the Amazon basin because the Aedes aegypti mosquito is what transmits it. It's a reservoir in non-human primates. And so generally it's been sort of a jungle disease, but it's now appearing in urban environments. So that's the big concern. And of course, there's a very effective way to deal with it. It's called vaccination. And you have to have 95% of the population vaccinated to really prevent outbreaks. Sounds kind of like measles, right? But it'll be interesting because we have our new committee on vaccinations. Maybe we won't be recommending vaccines for yellow fever anymore. I don't know. China reported its first case of bird flu, H5N1. It was the first case that's been reported in mainland China since last July. And officials said, but it was from Vietnam. So I don't know. So the big news on the COVID front is that there is a new variant. It's called NB 1.8.1. It sort of emerged in travelers in April this year, mostly from the Pacific Rim, China and the Pacific Rim, and a few folks from Europe. Interestingly enough, this is probably why hospitalizations have been going up in hospitals in the Western Pacific. But it doesn't seem to be particularly more virulent. So there's no increase in case fatality. Preliminary studies suggest that the difference is that it's actually binding to the ACE2 receptor a little bit more vigorously, which is why it may be a little bit more infectious and why it's now outcompeting other viruses. It's in the Omicron family, and it is a recombination of 2 runs that we already know, JN1 and XDV. I'll show you in the diagram. And all evidence suggests that the vaccines will be effective because it's closely related, and also that Paxlovid treatment will probably be helpful. But for the fall, both Moderna and Pfizer are planning on targeting the dominant species that's around now, LP8, and I'll show you a diagram of that. If you look at what's been circulating over the last several months, it's mostly LP8.1. That's 70% of the viruses are LP8.1. And I'll show you the data. It hasn't been a bad COVID season, but because it's much more virulent than flu, the mortality has almost been equal. And I'll show you some data for that. This is the Travelers program. This is collecting wastewater from planes and airports. And the interesting thing is you can see this pretty significant rise. So around the world, there's much more of this coming into the United States. Versions where LP8 is the dominant strain. If you look at what's going on in the wastewater from around the world, LP8 is only about a third, and the biggest increase is this NB 1.8.1 that I just mentioned. So 33% of what's coming in is that new variant from the west, from the west, Pacific West. It's Southeast Asia. I guess it's where West and East meet. I don't know. I'm just back for a day or so I'm a little out of it. So this is the relatedness thing. I know it's complicated, but the main thing to see is that Omicron was the original strain here, and all of these are variants of Omicron, and they're all pretty closely related. So if you look at the dominant strain in 23, it was this JN1 strain. In 24, it was these flirt variants, the KPs that we talked about. And this past year, a few mutations in the spike protein led to LP8.1. That is the current dominant strain, and that is the likely target for the Moderna and Pfizer vaccine. What's interesting is the new Chinese variant, or I shouldn't say the China variant, but it is from China probably, is a recombination of the JN1 and XDV, and that is what NB 1.8.1 is. It is likely that the targets for the fall, the new vaccine, will cover that as well. If you look at what's in the traveler's wastewater that I just showed you, it's mostly this one that is the variant, the new variant, and then some of the original B11 and then LP8. So it's interesting to see that we can't isolate ourselves from the rest of the world. People are flying around, and when variants happen, they enter the country. My guess is, because it is slightly more infectious, that next year the dominant strain will be this NB 1.8.1. It's likely to take over. But the vaccine that they're anticipating is likely to be very useful for that one, and it's also targeted towards the current strains, which makes a lot of sense. Now, I mentioned the things about COVID, but it's interesting to me that if you look at what's actually happened, it's very low in the United States. But if you go back, the peak that we had in hospitalizations early in test positivity, emergency room visits, was really last summer. And then we had another little peak kind of in the winter months, and it's come back down again. And if you look at wastewater overall, it still remains low, but it's present. Just because it's low doesn't mean it's not around. And I know plenty of people who actually still have been getting COVID. So as we look back on this past year, what kind of COVID season did we have? Seems pretty low, but actually if you look at what the first 2 months, October through December of this past winter, there were between 8,000 and 13,000 deaths attributed to COVID. So just extrapolate the next 2 months, you end up with about 20, it's in the range of 20,000 deaths, which is really kind of a bad flu season. So even though there are fewer cases, the mortality is higher per case than it is for influenza. So if you look at our data from TEFI, which is the Texas data from wastewater, measles seems to be waning. There was a little bit of bird flu detected in Brownsville in May 5th, that week of May 5th. SARS-CoV-2, influenza A and B, and RSV levels are all falling as you would expect as the respiratory virus season comes to an end. But parvo-19, which is sort of a virus that causes a respiratory illness, and norovirus is GI, and rotavirus, GI virus, are still around. Okay. Measles finally seems to be waning, but we're up to 1,168 cases. 12% of those cases were hospitalized. There have been 3 deaths, and if you look at the measles weekly cases, finally beginning to subside. The total number of cases, however, is still going to probably get close to what we had in 2019. Texas leads the way, as we always do, with a total of 742 cases. But if you look at the number of cases, it's beginning to finally decline. Almost all of the cases are due to the fact that people were not vaccinated against measles. So I hope the new committee, the new committee, vaccine committee, will recommend getting kids vaccinated for measles. You never know. Now, I mentioned the respiratory virus season coming to an end, but I just wanted to point out influenza now, it's pretty low, below normal levels. But it was a pretty significant season. And one interesting thing that I found interesting is most of the early season was influenza A. The vast majority, that's yellow, and green is influenza B. As the season went on, Yellow disappeared, and it became mostly influenza B. So it was like interesting that those two viruses did not sort of go together, but evolve separately. And it was a tough season. If you look at adult mortality, it was one of the highest that we've had in a while. Pediatric deaths were also higher than in the past. You can see that pediatric deaths were higher than in previous seasons. So it was considered a tough season. There was 47 million cases, 610,000 hospitalizations, and 26,000 deaths from influenza. But again, it's kind of, when you look at COVID, which didn't have as many cases, but the death rate, the amount of mortality was almost the same. So still a serious disease. And it was a bad pediatric influenza data. There were a total of 241 pediatric deaths. Hopefully we'll have intelligent vaccine strategies for all of these diseases, since they're all totally approachable by vaccination. Anyway, I want to end this week with a bunch of shout-outs. First of all, congratulations to Dr. Andrea Bradford, the Associate Professor of Medicine, who was selected to the National Academy of Medicine Scholars and Diagnostic Excellence Program for her project, Implementing Strategies for Achieving Diagnostic Excellence in Mental Health. And that program is designed to develop a group of leaders who can drive implementation of effective strategies to deal with mental health issues. Also, congratulations to Dr. Wei Li, Professor of Ophthalmology, who received the Research to Prevent Blindness Stein Innovation Award, provides funding to scientists actively engaged in research with the goal to understand the visual system and diseases that impact its function. Of course, a very special shout out to Lily. It was her 6th birthday on June 6th, and we were very excited to celebrate with her. She is at camp, and she had her birthday at camp, but she will be back soon. Anyway, happy birthday, Lily. And finally, I want to wish a happy Father's Day to all the dads watching, and particularly me. I need a break. I need somebody to say happy Father's Day to me. Anyway, I hope you have a great, relaxing week, and I can't wait to see you next week.